Your doctor handed you a pamphlet. It had a picture of a woman in a clean white dress, hands folded gently over her belly, smiling. The headline said something like, "For two," or "A calmer you, a calmer baby." Inside, it recommended a specific brand of cigarette. Light, smooth, easier on the throat. Your doctor said it might help with the nausea. It might calm your nerves. Pregnancy is stressful after all. You're eating for two now. You should be taking care of yourself. So you did. This wasn't a fringe belief. This wasn't some folk remedy your neighbor whispered about over the fence. This was printed advice, distributed in medical offices, backed by physicians, and repeated in magazines that pregnant women read while waiting for their appointments. Smoking during pregnancy wasn't considered reckless. It was considered responsible. Modern even. If you were anxious or struggling with morning sickness, your doctor might suggest a cigarette to settle your nerves, not as a joke, as treatment. The idea that cigarettes could help pregnant women wasn't invented by tobacco companies alone, though they certainly encouraged it. It came from doctors, real doctors, the kind who delivered your baby, who checked your blood pressure, who told you what to eat and how much weight to gain. In the 1940s and 50s, obstetricians genuinely believed that smoking could ease the discomforts of pregnancy. It was sedating. It suppressed appetite, which was useful if a woman was gaining too much weight, something doctors were oddly obsessed with. And if a woman was too thin or too nervous, a cigarette could help her relax, settle her stomach, give her something to do with her hands during the long, anxious months of waiting. There were ads in women's magazines, full-page spreads, a glowing mother-to-be resting in a chair, cigarette held delicately between her fingers. The copy didn't say, "Smoking won't hurt your baby." It said smoking would help. It would soothe you. It would make you a better, calmer mother. Some ads even claimed that doctors preferred certain brands. More throat specialists recommend this one. More physicians choose that one. It wasn't subtle. It was everywhere. And women believed it. Why wouldn't they? If your doctor said it was fine if the magazine in the waiting room showed pictures of happy, healthy mothers who smoked, if your own mother had smoked through her pregnancies and you turned out fine, what reason did you have to doubt it? Trust wasn't a luxury. It was the entire system. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have parenting forums or access to medical studies. You had your doctor, and your doctor said it was safe. So you smoked. Maybe a few a day, maybe a pack. Some women smoked right up until labor. Some smoked in the hospital afterward, in the recovery room, while the baby slept in the bassinet next to the bed. Nurses didn't stop them. Doctors didn't frown. It was just what people did. But your body knew something your doctor didn't. Every time you inhaled, carbon monoxide entered your bloodstream. It attached itself to your red blood cells in place of oxygen, and those cells carried it everywhere, including across the placenta. Your baby's cells were supposed to receive oxygen. Instead, they received carbon monoxide. Not a lot, just a little, just enough to make a difference. The baby's heart had to work harder to compensate. It beat faster, trying to make up for what wasn't there. The placenta itself started to change. The blood vessels narrowed. The flow of nutrients slowed. Your baby wasn't starving, but it wasn't thriving either. It was growing, but smaller, slower, with less of everything it needed. You didn't feel it. There was no pain, no warning. Your belly grew. You felt the baby move. Your doctor listened to the heartbeat and said everything sounded fine. And maybe it did sound fine, but fine isn't the same as optimal. Fine just means nothing is visibly wrong yet. When the baby was born, it was smaller than average, not alarmingly small, just a little under 5 pounds maybe, 6. The doctor said some babies are just small. It happens. And that was true. Some babies are small. But yours was small because it had spent 9 months receiving less oxygen than it needed. Its lungs were underdeveloped. Its brain had grown, but not quite as much as it would have if it had gotten everything it was supposed to. The risk of sudden infant death, what we now call SIDS, was higher, not guaranteed, just higher. You'd never know which babies would have been fine anyway, and which ones wouldn't. Some babies were born too early. Smoking increased the likelihood of preterm labor. Again, not every time, not even most of the time, but more often than it should have. Premature babies in the 1950s didn't have the same chances they do now. Neonatal care was limited. Incubators existed, but they weren't sophisticated. If a baby was born at 32 weeks because its mother's placenta had started to fail, there wasn't much anyone could do except wait and hope. Some of those babies survived, some didn't. No one connected it to the cigarettes. There were other effects that didn't show up right away. Cognitive delays, learning difficulties, behavioral issues, attention problems. These things surfaced years later in childhood, and no one traced them back to pregnancy. Why would they? The mother had done everything her doctor told her to do. She had followed the rules. If her child struggled in school, or had trouble focusing, or seemed more anxious than other kids, that was just how the child was. It didn't occur to anyone that the problem had started before birth. It took decades for the medical community to actually say it out loud. Smoking during pregnancy is harmful. Don't do it. Even when studies started showing that babies born to mothers who smoked weighed less. Even when researchers demonstrated the link between smoking and preterm birth. Even when the evidence piled up, the advice didn't change quickly. Doctors were slow to let go of what they'd been taught. Tobacco companies fought back hard, funding studies that muddied the waters, insisting that the science wasn't settled. Pregnant women were caught in the middle, being told by some sources that it was fine and by others that it wasn't, with no clear way to know who to trust. By the 1960s, the tide was starting to turn, but only barely. Some doctors stopped recommending it. Some started warning against it. But plenty of women were still being told it was no big deal, or that cutting back was enough, or that the stress of quitting would be worse for the baby than the smoking itself. That last one, the idea that quitting was more dangerous than continuing, lingered for years. It gave women permission to keep smoking because stopping felt impossible, and they'd been told the attempt might hurt the baby anyway. It wasn't until the late 1970s and 1980s that the message became consistent and urgent. By then, the damage had already been done to millions of pregnancies. Entire generations of children had been exposed in utero, and no one could go back and undo it. There was no way to measure what had been lost. You couldn't point to a specific child and say, this is what smoking did. You could only look at the statistics and know that outcomes were worse across the board in ways that were preventable. And here's the part that sits uncomfortably. The women who smoked during pregnancy in the 1940s and 50s weren't making a reckless choice. They were making the choice their doctors told them to make. They were following medical advice. They trusted the system, and the system was wrong. Not malicious, not careless, just wrong. And by the time anyone admitted it, decades had passed. Babies had been born, childhoods had been lived. It was too late to take it back. Now we act like it's obvious. Of course, you don't smoke while pregnant. Everyone knows that. But everyone knows is a recent development. 2 generations ago, everyone knew the opposite, and they were just as certain. It makes you wonder what we're certain about now. If your grandmother or mother was told this by her doctor, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to see what else used to be considered completely normal, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from.